Your nostalgia is poison. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. Today I have a little bit of a ramble. I've noticed a lot of videos and responses in the last few months, ever since the very credible allegations against Neil Gaiman have come up about him being an abuser. And this is nothing new, right? There's like a cycle of us realizing that an artist who has created work that we care about and we find meaningful turns out to be an awful person, whether through their open bigotry and hate or whether through their actions of abuse. And every time it happens, there's a cycle of response. And so we see it with, J.K. Rowling obviously is the loudest name in the scene right now, but you also have Orson Scott Card. And then if you move on to other mediums, film and music, you'll find dozens of similar artists, right? So it is a continual discussion, and it seems to come up over and over again. And it's always framed, can I divorce the art from the artist? And I know that that is a technical term that comes from the world of literary critique and theory, but it's used, at least common day parlance, to ask this question, can I still enjoy a piece of art? Can I consume a piece of art with pleasure, knowing that the creator of that art is an awful person? And I don't have a whole lot to add to this conversation, but I do have a slightly different lens to look at it. I want to start by saying I'm not telling anyone what to do, how to believe. I'm just saying my impression of the whole kind of landscape. So when you look at this question, the common answer I see among the lefty circles that I travel in is this wish to have it both ways. So they say, I can still appreciate this art. I just won't do anything that will provide any sort of profit to the person who's created this art because I don't support them, but I still am willing to support the art they have created. So I won't buy any new art that they make. I won't pay for it in any way. I won't do anything that contributes to this person's profit, whether it be their actual fiscal profit or their profit in terms of popularity or renown. And as long as I am avoiding that, I can still enjoy this art for whatever reason. And usually the reason we want to enjoy that art is because we have this idea of how important it was to us. And that is our nostalgia. That is us remembering an experience and a past that we've invented for the most part. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's the general opinion. And I agree with it for the most part, especially if you consume this art at a young age, then it could have been transformative for you. It could have put your life on a different trajectory. It could have let you find meaning in a world that was hostile to you when you were young or you felt alone. So I'm not saying that that's impossible. We definitely have those experiences with art where we feel connected to it, only to find out that the creator is awful many, many years later. We have to ask ourselves, really, is it my responsibility to navigate the world in such a way that I am taking account of other people's behavior before I just seek out my own pleasure and my own happiness? And my position, right? So I agree with that general consensus, the general lefty consensus, but I go a little bit further because I want to ask myself, whatever enjoyment that I get out of consuming any art, whatever temporary worldly enjoyment that I may receive, is that more important than the harm that the artist has created, whether it be the emotional harm or the actual abuse? Is my pleasure more important than someone else's suffering? My pleasure in terms of what I would get from consuming that art newly, or my pleasure in what I previously received from that art in the past? Is that more important than someone else's suffering? And for me, I find it hard to look at that equation and ever say my temporary pleasure is more important than someone else's suffering, and that it is worth it for me to engage in this activity because it brings me pleasure, even knowing that by doing so, I am participating in an ecosystem of violence and suffering that is being perpetuated against other people, real people, not just conceptual people, right? And that participation in that ecosystem of violence and suffering is not something I ever want to be part of. And because of that, I find it hard ever to find my pleasure more important than that. And there are two things that really made me start thinking about this and made me want to make this video, that made me think my position is maybe a little different than some others. And I'm not going to call them out by name, but there are two videos I've seen recently. And one was directly addressing the Neil Gaiman situation. And the person in that video basically took this normal leftist stance. They don't want to support the artist. But they said, however, I have really enjoyed the work you've created in the past. And because of that, in the future, if you were to publish a new book, I still would want to read it. I would just get it out of the library, so I wasn't supporting you. But I still want to experience the art you create. And I heard that, and my first question is why? Like, what is so important about this one individual's art that overweighs the violence and suffering that they cause other people? And so I'll get back to that, because the other example, a queer couple, two men in their mid-40s, I'd say, and they very recently got new matching tattoos of wands because they love Harry Potter, and they're huge. They go from their wrist to the crook of their elbow. And they've numerous times mentioned how much love they have for the Harry Potter franchise. And they never mention J.K. Rowling. But I don't understand how you can be a queer man in 2024 and get something inked on your body that every time you look at it and every time anyone sees it, there's a direct association with someone whose actions are monstrous and harmful against the queer community. I have a hard time computing that. No matter how meaningful these books may have been to you, never mind that if they're in their mid-40s now, they were outside of the demographic for those books when they were released. So their nostalgia is already the nostalgia of their adulthood, not their childhood. Never mind that, right? Even with that aside, I don't understand how something can be so meaningful to you that you're willing to put it on your body, knowing that when other people see it, it could cause them harm, psychological harm, emotional harm. It could be traumatic for people because there's always going to be an association with someone who is engaged in monstrous actions, at least promoted really hateful ideology, with this thing you've put on your body. And so I have to ask why. What is it about it that is so meaningful to you that that is more important than the potential harm you could cause others? What is so meaningful and exciting about reading a new Neil Gaiman book that outweighs the amount of suffering that he has caused in the world? So that is my question. The problem is that question is inherently colored by nostalgia. This is why nostalgia is poisonous, because nostalgia isn't a memory of how things used to be. Nostalgia is a constructed ideal of how we wanted things to be, right? Of how we wished our experiences were. You don't see people who had really crappy childhoods have nostalgia for their childhood, right? You don't see that. You see people have invented a childhood that was idyllic in many ways, and that's what they want to return to. They have created this idea of the past as being better than the present because their problems and suffering in the present are sometimes too much for them to take. And so instead of addressing that, they long for things that used to be. But the problem with nostalgia is it was never real. None of what we clue into as nostalgia is real. And nostalgia is used against us, is weaponized against individuals, right? It's used to sell us things, whether that be art or whether that be politics. Nostalgia is used to manipulate people, and it is used to help control where we put our capital in terms of our fiscal capital and our attention. You can see this in contemporary American politics very clearly. The whole idea of make America great again is suggesting that there was this halcyon days of time past where things were better than they are now. And that's what we need to return to. So it's preying on this idea of nostalgia. And it's the same thing in art. It may not be as nefarious, but it's the same thing where nostalgia is used to sell us something. And I agree that there can be something fun about nostalgia. Like, I like Stranger Things. I thought that was great. But if the only reason you like that TV show is because it reminds you of a 1980s that you think you lived through, that shouldn't be the value of that show, right? Anytime nostalgia is used effectively, it is a color, a flavor on top of a narrative and a story that has compelling characters, that has a compelling journey, that has something else going on. If the whole thing is nostalgia, then that is empty. It doesn't mean anything. So yes, nostalgia can be fun. It can be, it can be added on to art in a way that makes that art more interesting and exciting. But ultimately, it's there to sell us something. And it is playing on our memories of the past that are not reliable, that are not trustworthy. So your nostalgia is poison. It is killing you because it is holding you back, right? That is the danger of nostalgia. Nostalgia, this idealized memory of things as they did not exist, is holding us back from creating new things in the future. It keeps us looking backward. It keeps us holding tight to things that never really were real in the first place. And it prevents us from actual growth, from both artistic growth and personal growth, right? So nostalgia is poison. It is killing you, okay? I loved Neil Gaiman's books, like American Gods, Anansi Boys, Neverwhere, Sandman, Good Omens, Ocean at the End of the Lane, all these books and graphic novels. I loved them. They're great. And based on those experiences, I imagine that if he were to publish a new book, I would enjoy it in terms of the content of it, because he knows how to write and he's good at creating interesting characters and well thought out worlds. But who cares? Like, why does that matter? Just from a numbers perspective, never mind the emotional weight of participating in an ecosystem of violence. Never mind that. There are so many artists creating phenomenal art in every medium you can think of. There is no way that forgoing one person's art is going to even be a blip on the radar of the amazing opportunities for you to consume life-changing art, right? So this idea that there is any one individual artist whose output is so incredible, so mind-blowing, that participating in any sort of ecosystem of violence and suffering is acceptable, I just don't think it holds up to the math alone, right? I don't understand what the impulse is to go seek out future work from that person, other than being lost in nostalgia, being lost in our memory of how we used to feel when we consumed that person's art. And I don't think that's benefiting us. I don't think it's helping us. I don't think it's creating the kind of future we want to live in. I don't think nostalgia is like a type of healthy escape. I think it is a set of chains. And if we're not careful, all it does is lock us down. Okay, so that sounds pretty extreme. I'm willing to own that. And maybe I expressed it in a way that's more forceful than I really believe. But I do believe it is true. I also recognize, especially as a Buddhist monk, that there is a place for forgiveness. And so when there are individuals who do awful things, there's definitely a place for forgiveness. But my personal forgiveness of someone and the social or parasocial forgiveness of celebrities is not the same thing. I mean, I'm a prison abolitionist. I definitely think there's a role for forgiveness. And I think that people that engage in harmful actions, there definitely is a way that they can be reintegrated into society, into community, right? That we are not defined by the worst things we've done. I believe that 100%. How that translates into celebrities and artists joining the social community again, I don't know. Because that is something that has to be decided on an individual level and then on a community level, right? I don't have an easy answer for that. I do believe in forgiveness, but forgiveness is not about me finding a new way that I can continue to consume art from someone who has engaged in harmful actions, right? That's not the point of forgiveness. Forgiveness is to recognize the humanity of individuals. Forgiveness is to recognize that all human beings are suffering in one way or another, and they don't want to suffer, and they make mistakes. And sometimes they make those mistakes over and over and over again, right? Recognizing people's humanity, that's what forgiveness is. And doing that is useful for me, but that does not mean I need to continue seeking out whatever artistic output they create. Those are two separate things. So I hold a big space in my heart for forgiveness. I think it is incredibly important. I think at a social level, people need to exhibit remorse, and they need to exhibit that they have taken some sort of actions to remedy whatever harm they've caused as the bare minimum before there can be a level of social forgiveness and reintegration into the community, whatever that may look like on an individual or a parasocial level. On the personal level, it's different, but this isn't talking about the personal level because we are not personally related to these individuals who are causing harm. We are related to them through the art they create only. And even that is through our experiences of that art and through the constructed, idealized memories of those experiences. When you are pursuing any sort of personal pleasure or enjoyment, I find it useful to ask myself, what is on the other side of this enjoyment? And any time where the calculus suggests that on the other side of my personal enjoyment is someone perpetuating suffering or harm, that is always going to tip the scales and say that my personal enjoyment is not as important as that. And my abstention from consuming that doesn't mitigate the harm that person has caused, right? If none of us ever read another Neil Gaiman novel, it doesn't stop the fact that he actually abused these women, allegedly, right? But what it does is it removes me from this ecosystem of suffering. And in this relationship, that's the best I can do. I just want to be mindful whenever I consume art to the best of my ability. If I am doing something for the purpose of experiencing some sort of temporary worldly pleasure, I want to know what is on the other side of that. And is my own pleasure worth more than other people's suffering? And now that's not math I can do for you. You know, I'm not telling anyone how they should feel about a thing. I'm saying how I feel about a thing and how that math usually works out for me. It could be different for you. So it's not an easy question. There is a very pat answer that I want to appreciate this person's art without supporting them in any way. And there is the acknowledgement that you can recognize beauty and greatness and skill in artistic endeavors while simultaneously recognizing that the creator of that art was or is a bad person. But those aren't the most important questions to me. The most important questions to me is that what are my priorities in life? Are my priorities my own mere temporary happiness? Happiness that is wildly shaped by my nostalgia, which itself is weaponized by people who want to sell me things? Is that my priority? Or is my priority other people and learning how to live in the world so that I can be a base of support and love for other people? How I can do everything in my power, as meager as it may be, to eliminate the suffering of others. Is that my priority? And if that's my priority, does that contradict with actions such as indulging in my nostalgia by participating with the art of people who have done horrific things? So that's the question that I ask myself. That's why I think my position is possibly a little more heavy-handed than I hear many people saying. And I don't present it as a way to judge others. I'm in no judgment of others. The only one I can judge is my own mind. And even that is a struggle. So I'm not judging anyone for the choices they make. I just want us to be aware that a lot of what we do is shaped by nostalgia. And that nostalgia is based in a falsity. It isn't based in reality, but it's based in our construction of reality and the way we wish things were. And those experiences of pleasure, of hope, of joy, of whatever that nostalgia brings us, we can create those anew, right? We can discover those in new art, in new ways of living in the world. We don't have to rely upon this invented past in order to find joy and hope and meaning and comfort in the world moving forward. So I'll end it there with saying that's what I hope for all of you, is that no matter how you respond to problematic people, problematic artists, I hope that you're able to consume art in a mindful way, and I hope you're able to live your life in such a way that that art is a meaningful part of you understanding what it means to be a good person in the world, and that you can find ways to make your life meaningful in whatever context that makes sense for you. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I appreciate you. Be kind to yourselves, take care of each other, and go slowly.